And it says, please ask Dutch. Dutch, do you know who up in New York is talking about you?
Yes. There's two answers to that, really.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, you say who, and they said nobody. That's the first one. And the other one is what's the guy? I read this before. What's his name?
Well, I actually blanked it out on your end. Then I tell him Joel Gertner from ECW fame. And Joel also says, hell, he should get it.
Well, I do get it, but I don't get it because I've been hit in the head a couple of thousand times. But and speaking of Joel, I don't think I've ever met him but one time. One time is all I've ever met him. So, but I heard a lot about him. Heard a lot about the ECW guys, and see down south when they started ECW, it was like, well, it was an independent group. We knew that. But some of the guys they had working there, we weren't familiar with them down south. Then, of course, the tapes came in, and we saw this and saw that. And I've had a lot of opinions about ECW over the years, but I did like the way they produced TV because it was similar to studio wrestling. It wasn't a huge place. You could probably get maybe an ECW arena. I didn't go back in the old days, but they tell me in the old days it was a hellhole. You'd see dead rats, and you'd see this, and pipes broken and everything. They've cleaned it up now. So when you go in there, it's a fairly decent arena, but it was similar to, you probably get 900 people in there, 1,000 people. But so I was watching it, and I love the way they produced it. One thing I noticed, they had one announcer, which I liked, because you didn't have, like WWE now, before they went back to the two announcer, they had three. And they sent me a question. I'm all over the place right now. They sent me a questionnaire, WWE did, about, I don't know, a year ago, maybe, and wanted to know what changes would I make to the TV product to make it more palatable, I guess, more for fans to watch it. The first thing I thought about putting down is fire everybody and restart. That's what I'd have done. But one of the big issues I had with their production was the three announcers. I hated three announcers. I still hate three announcers. I kind of hate the two they got now on SmackDown. I mean, one's a straight announcer and the other's a color guy. I got that. I think Pat McAfee does a great job. I really do. But when I heard ECW only had the one announcer, I said, well, that's different too. But I liked their show because the crowds were loud, they were energetic, they were like within touching distance. But down south, we had never heard of ECW, but we learned to like it. Except that Paul Dangerously, this is what he had. He liked Memphis wrestling. He was a big fan of Memphis wrestling. And somebody said, what do you attribute Paul Heyman's success in ECW? I says, well, this is what I think. I think he went out and he found a bunch of people with death wishes that wanted to die. And he put them all together and says, hey, have at it. And see, when he came down south, he learned different gimmicks or matches, like the scaffold match. They didn't have a lot of gimmick matches in WWF. They didn't just have gimmick matches. And some like a double bullwhip match. Of course, you'd have to have a guy with a bullwhip. They had never had those matches. They never had like the barbed wire matches or any of that stuff, because most of the territory in the old Vince McMahon territory, they just had straight up wrestling matches. And if they had a gimmick match, it'd just be in the main event, and that was it. Hell, we used to have 3 gimmick matches on the card in Memphis almost every other week, because we had to draw people. But and I said all he did was found people with a death wish and introduced old style Southern wrestling to the North. That's what he did in Philadelphia. Now I'm gonna tell this story. I was in a 7-Eleven one time, and the guy went, "Hey, dude, you Dutch Mantell, man." I said, "Oh yeah." He said, "Man, you're a big fan, man. Hey." He said, "You ever do that crazy stuff to do an ECW, man?" See, he'd watching ECW. He didn't watching the old Memphis show. I said, "Where do you think they got those ideas?" "Oh, no, man." I said, "Well, they got them from Memphis." "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." Uh, but he said, "They draw a lot of people." I says, "Well, listen, Philadelphia is a town with 3 million people. Memphis was a town with about 350,000. We would sell out to Mid-South Arena sometimes with that low turnout the low population. And they would run ECW Arena once every 3 to 4 to 5 weeks and put 900 people in there. So if you just look at the sheer example of tickets we draw as opposed to them, and they got all their ideas from us. But the guy had no idea of the history of old Memphis, and he would just see an ECW. I was just trying to smarten him up. So whether he got smartened up or not, I don't know. I didn't give a shit. So I told him, "Get out of the way and let me get my 6-pack of beer and let me go." So,
and also it's no coincidence that ECW, when it started off, had Eddie Gilbert as their booker as well.
And I never really found out the true story about the Eddie Gilbert and the Paul Heyman breakup, but it was somewhat. Paul said he kind of stole it or tried to steal it, and that's what Eddie said about Paul. They were like big buddies one time, huge buddies. But I think he said Paul went back in there and stole it underneath him. So I don't know the question, but Paul did, and when he took over, he did a good job, but he had a virgin audience. So it's easier to do things with a virgin audience than an audience that's seen everything. WWE fans now, they've seen everything. So now, and that's why I keep saying they need to go back to story, heavy on story, and then they'll get by. And they're going to get by anyway. I mean, because of this economic setup they got, they're going to get by anyway. But if they had story, and I always made stories like a 10-year-old kid could follow it. Never make a story that's hard to understand because nobody would get it then. Because most wrestling fans aren't PhDs in psychology. I mean, they're regular working people, and they go to work every day, and they come home on Monday nights or Friday nights, and they want to sit down and they won't be entertained for 2 or 3 hours. And I think for a long time, that's what WWE didn't do. Therefore, did they pay the price? No, not really. At the end of the day, they still made money, but the show did suck big time.